right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Elections Weekly. As usual, I'm your host, Eric Cunningham. And with us, as always, we have our two panels here, Joe Szymanski and Dylan Brown, both of which are regular contributors for Elections Daily. Joe Szymanski is the head of our elections team here as well. So a pretty eventful week of political news, including some last-minute political news that literally happened maybe 30 minutes to an hour before the start of the show. So we're going to go ahead and start with what's on with that breaking news, which is the New York Supreme Court's decision. It's worth noting the New York Supreme Court is not the highest court in New York, and this decision is somewhat likely to be overturned. But the opinion for now from the Supreme Court, or at least from the one judge on it, is that the legislative and a congressional map of New York, the two gerrymanders passed by the legislature, are illegal in violation of the New York State Constitution. It's no doubt these are gerrymanders. It's no doubt that they're done so. The legislature pretty much said so. Kathy Hochul said as much, that the goal of withdrawing these was to maximize the number of Democratic representatives for maybe not in exactly that language, but it's been pretty clear that was the intention the whole time, especially since the commission failed to produce anything. But what this does mean is that in theory, the path for Republicans to block this map goes forward. The map reduces Republicans to likely 4 seats. Perhaps the most egregious example on the map is the combining of Staten Island with Park Slope, stretching up into the more white, woke, affluent parts of Brooklyn that are very, very different than the crowd that you would find in Staten Island, traditionally belong in that seat and been part of that seat. So we really don't know what will happen here. The judge has given the legislature until the 11th to draw new maps of bipartisan support. Otherwise, a special master will take over. I'm also read that this basically is enjoined immediately pending appeal. Apparently from at least one person, I believe it was Daniel Lee, who said that on Twitter. It's also quite possible this could be overturned by a higher court in New York, one that has a majority of Cuomo and Democratic appointees instead of Pataki appointees, who still has a surprising number of judges on the court in the state of New York. I'll go ahead and throw it here around real quick just to get your thoughts on this, and then we'll go right into actual news. It's probably going to last a little bit longer, but I did figure it was worth talking about this because it did just happen before the show.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a very typical thing here of these rulings, but it's nice for Republicans to kind of get a sheet of paper that's like, yes, you see, this says that we're not wrong here. This was unfair to us the way you drew these maps. But I think it's very important. I think the Kingdom made a point, and I made this point in my kind of first thoughts on this as well. That look, once this goes to the Court of Appeals, the likely, not certain by any means, we never want to use certainty in the courtroom. Ever. You never know exactly, especially when it comes down to political matters, what could happen when it comes to a court decision on this. But in just depth terms of how the court is aligned, once this does get to the Court of Appeals, it's not even it is a when this gets to the Court of Appeals. It's very likely this ruling will be overturned, and that the 22-4 map that we have come to know will be kept in use. If it's not, well, then we'll have that discussion when it comes and what that means in terms of what that means for the state of New York. But otherwise, nice for Republicans to have this piece of paper. They can call that a win in terms of redistricting court. Probably not going to change the final outcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it won't. I don't think it'll change the final outcome either. The court is mostly, I think it's a majority Cuomo appointees. And sure, they're not as likely to support a Hochulmander as Hochul appointees would be, but I find it hard to believe that a majority of Cuomo appointees would overturn a Democratic map. One done by a legislature that was there during Cuomo's time in office. I mean, it's not like this is a whole new Democratic majority that Cuomo never had any working relationship with.
Mm-hmm. And it's worth noting, I agree with this in general. It'll be a surprise, although we've seen weirder things happen. You've obviously had some judges like Maureen O'Connell in Ohio willing to buck their own party on this matter. You had North Carolina, which just made up portions of the Constitution, for lack of a better term, on gerrymandering. Certainly New York's Constitution is a little bit on clearer grounds than that. And then you have the recent judge in Maryland who did a similar thing, although, again, that could easily be overturned by a higher court. Although it's worth noting, unlike in New York, Maryland's courts are generally controlled by Republicans at this point due to Larry Hogan's appointments. So we'll see going on. If this does change, Republicans would stand to gain. Currently, Republicans are only favored in 4 seats. This could possibly expand, even despite New York's Democratic lean, to 7 or 8 seats where they're favored in, and then several other seats in Long Island and the Hudson Valley and upstate that would be competitive for them for sure. A map that would be unlikely to see, for example, 10 Republicans being elected out of 26. 10, 11, 12 could be very possible under a fairer map. But, this is all hypothetical. This one, it depends on what is drawn and how things are drawn. For now, we don't expect this to change.
I don't think a map, even one that had to get bipartisan support, I don't think Democrats would ever draw a map that got 10, 11, 12 Republican
seats? No. Republicans elected. Keep in mind, Republicans have won in upstate. They have won seats that have been as much as Biden, Clinton, Obama plus 20. The Syracuse seat that came close to winning in Rochester, and a red wave is what I'm saying. Those sorts of seats become much more attainable, especially in upstate, in a very swingy region, Long Island as well. That's how you get to 10. It'd be much more likely you would get 7 or 8 at most Republican districts. Even 7 is kind of a stretch. Need at that point.
If you want to talk about it, would probably be 6.
Yeah.
Talking about a fair map, you would probably see, not only would you probably see a Staten Island sink, theoretically, with not only Staten Island, but also instead of going into bluer parts of Brooklyn, it would probably take in the Orthodox Jewish community in South Brooklyn, which we have seen a pretty radical turn to Republican Party in the recent cycles, and then probably a second seat in Long Island as well. There would certainly be more competitive seats in upstate. The Syracuse seat would not be as much of a sink as it is now. Probably both Antonio Delgado's and Sean Patrick Maloney's seats would get more competitive. We wouldn't see Delgado's seat go into the Albany area like it does for sure. But in terms, this is all speculation. I don't think this is going to happen. And there's certainly more news to get to.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting, but we're going to switch to ones that are a little more feasible and more realistic in terms of being upheld or shifts going on right now. The biggest one in that category would be Maryland. I don't believe we discussed the Maryland situation yet, but unlike in this one, Maryland's a judge has overturned that. The legislature has submitted their replacement map, which would be a 7-1 map. It would shore up Andy Harris, but it would also mainly only marginally reduce Democratic strength in the 6th district and then the 2nd district, I believe. The 6 would go from about a Biden or from what is currently right now on the current map, a Biden plus, I believe, 23 seat because of large portions of Montgomery County. That would go to about Biden plus 10. That's certainly within the realm of competitiveness in a red way. I mean, Dan Bongino, of all people, almost won a much more Democratic district, Obama plus 15 district, or Obama plus 10 district, it was Obama plus 15 in 2014, which is one of the most ridiculous things to think of in hindsight. Congressman Dan Bongino would be from the 6th district would be that'd be like Alan West levels of strangeness there.
Are you telling me that John Delaney almost blew it?
Yes. Well, it's a red seat. It's a red district. It is a red district. Yeah, it's a red district, and he was he won that red district by a lot of points many times.
Yeah.
I'm thinking Dylan doesn't quite believe me on this one.
I have an ounce of skepticism here.
But the other notable change would be, of course, the 2nd district going to about a Biden plus 19. This is not really too interesting, other than the fact this would have been a Clinton plus 10 seat, plus 11 seat, I believe, in 2016, which again, not likely to flip. This is Baltimore County. But that would be certainly competitive. Republicans have already basically said, no, this isn't acceptable. Larry Hogan could either veto or pocket veto the map. They've been really aggressively pushing for a 6-2 map, which is the most feasible. It's worth noting, of course, that the Citizens Commission that Larry Hogan kind of drafted out of thin air, and drew their own maps, created a map which would have drawn Steny Hoyer into a majority black district, which would be unacceptable to Steny Hoyer, very acceptable to progressive Democrats, of course.
Can you see my grin?
It would have been so if we're just going straight off, like if we're going with the assumption that a court would draw something like the Citizens Commission, it would be a 6-2 map. There would not be a third competitive district, and Steny Hoyer, who Larry Hogan almost defeated for Congress 20 years ago in what would probably be one of the greatest revenge arcs of all time, would be drawn out in that scenario, which would be very unusual. I have posited at Elections Daily that if the Maryland legislature even thinks that it's a possibility that the court would do that, they would cede on 6-2 immediately, because losing Steny Hoyer would be such a major blow to establishment Democrats. They would not be willing to risk that. Right now, they don't seem concerned by that. But if this starts going into further rounds of litigation, I think they would be possibly willing to cede on a 6-2. You could draw a competitive 6-2 that's about Trump plus 5 and 6. That would probably be competitive and still protect Hoyer.
Yeah. I think Maryland has certainly been the most interesting redistricting news we've gotten this week. It should be noted that the judge who wrote the opinion striking on the maps is actually a very well respected Democratic connected judge in the state of Maryland. Mm-hmm. I forget the name, but she I know is well respected. This is not an opinion from like in New York where it comes from a known conservative justice. This is an opinion that comes from a very well respected judge in the state of Maryland, and someone who has connections to Democratic officials. So that's what I think. Number one, that's why people were like, oh, why don't they just go for maybe a slightly different 8-1? Why you didn't necessarily see that from the Maryland legislature, like we've kind of seen the nonsense that we've seen in Ohio. This is going to be very interesting to watch. And like Eric said, the new 6, if this is what would be accepted as the map, what they proposed, excuse me, 6-2, it's very interesting because David Trone has already called out to complain about this seat, because under this Biden plus 10, Clinton plus 1 seat, Trone would have to do something that he never expected to have to do, which is actually campaign.
Yes.
Frederick County is a place that's been that could be very interesting in a 2022 Republican midterm. It just takes in significantly less parts of Montgomery County, and the parts it does takes in are probably the most, other than Germantown, are probably the most, the least Democratic parts of Montgomery County, Maryland by far. Really going to be the sticking point is going to be Carroll County. Carroll County, Maryland is really going to be the sticking point. The new map, once again, because if that is a county that is a very Republican county, and part of that kind of, other than Frederick County, but kind of that wave of four Republican counties, the 3 outer western ones, and then Carroll County, which are very Republican counties, kind of from that western to central part of Maryland. Carroll County is going to be the sticking point. That's going to be the point where it's going to be argued when this is eventually appealed in court, when this comes before the court by Republican lawyers. That's what's going to be the key thing here is, whether or not, there's, because right now Carroll County is put into that second district with the outer parts of Baltimore County with Dutch Ruppersberger. The sticking point is whether or not the court forces Maryland Democrats to cede on to 6-2 and put Carroll County, which is again a very, very red county. It's a Republican plus 30 county. It's pretty deep red for Maryland. Putting that in would create a 6th district that would be about a Trump plus 10, 11 seat, which would certainly knock out Trone and would certainly elect a Republican for decent parts of the decade.
Mm-hmm. And I'll let Dylan talk in a second, but it's worth noting it really does depend on where that district goes into. If the district, for example, draws more into Montgomery County, that would probably stay more closer to Trump plus 8 at least. If it goes into Baltimore County and you have a situation where Baltimore County, which is one of the largest county in Maryland, it's very unusually placed and it was basically mandatory to crack it multiple times, that would put it more like a Trump plus 12, 13, 14 seat, especially if you're taking in the redder portions, which would be far more safe for a Republican there. If Alex Mooney loses his primary in West Virginia, he could easily cross back over the border and then run for that district. I'm just suggesting that's a possibility.
I don't know. Okay, you guys have me really sold on the idea of knocking out Steny Hoyer.
That's the compromise.
This is how we win. We have the conservative left unity of knocking out Steny Hoyer for fair maps in Maryland. This is how we win.
See, I don't think we should cede the 2 seats, but if we had to do that map, knocking out Steny Hoyer is not a bad consolation prize.
It's like, there's literally no chance he'd win a primary in a 64% black seat.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. He only got 65% of the vote in his current district against an opponent who raised almost nothing.
He's faced some primaries, to be sure. I mean, he's from St. Mary County, which is far more rural. Not to say that he was ever a rural Democrat or anything, but like he's been much more in line with that outer, wider, suburban or exurban area, in an area that is increasingly, growing more and more black. At least his district is.
Yeah, like don't get me wrong. I think the map as it is great and should probably stay. But if you guys did get a more conservative map, knocking out Steny Hoyer is a good consolation prize, and that would definitely help the medicine go down.
Yeah, because the alternative, there's really only 3 scenarios here. There's this map. There's the hyper-competitive scenario, which is you have the 2 red seats and you have a competitive seat stretching down from Anne Arundel County into Calvert and into St. Mary's, which Hoyer could still run in that. That would be about a Biden plus 8 to 10 seat. I think it would have been I think it's actually a Trump 1 district, so he could potentially run in that. Granted, most of it would be new turf. He's not, I don't think, really had huge portions of Anne Arundel County in his seat, at least the portions that would be there. And this would be, Annapolis and the more outer regions as well. And then you have the other one, which is that you just basically stretch, Prince George's County, take in Calvert, take in St. Mary's, take in Charles County, and then you have the black seat. And, you have Steny Hoyer. It's kind of like he doesn't have anywhere to run. I think Democrats would be much more favorable to a map that is 6-2, that protects Hoyer and is more competitive in the long run. But I think Republicans would really want to push for a more safe 6-2. This is, of course, dependent on the courts upholding it, although it's worth noting the Maryland courts are controlled by Republicans by and large, Larry Hogan appointees. And Larry Hogan has been pretty aggressive in his redistricting efforts. This is pretty much all on him in terms of arguing against this and turning what was a kind of a fluke election win in 2018 over a rain tax, among other things, into a potentially 10-year congressional plan. That's definitely sort of surprising. That I don't think anyone would have seen him being more of a fighter on congressional maps than Governor Parsons in Missouri.
And Sununu.
Yeah, Sununu.
I never know how to pronounce Sununu. Just sounds wrong. No, this is him setting up his presidential run. We know he wants to do it in 2024. This is him saying, I fought as hard as I could for Republican maps, even in a blue state.
Yeah. As far as base, red meat for the Republican base, this is a pretty good way to do it. That's something Larry Hogan's kind of been lacking, to be honest. If you talk
not really something he could do in a democratic state, but this is a good opportunity for him.
Yeah, it's a pretty solid approach. So I'd say keep an eye on this. This could be really interesting. If Republicans gain a seat here, not only are they eliminating, this proposal would straight up eliminate the possibility of Democrats winning the Andy Harris district. Not only is that district Trump by double digits, Andy Harris routinely outruns Republicans somehow by large margins every time. He is very, very popular in that district.
For some reason.
Yeah, which would probably boggle the minds of a lot of people. But he's genuinely quite popular in the district. So that's just not something that's going to happen. If we're being honest here. But yeah, that's some interesting news. We'll also talk about 2 other states here, Ohio and Missouri. Missouri has been really weird. Missouri, the House is now fighting with the Senate. It appears they're really, really angry about something in redistricting involving Jason Smith. I'm not sure what their complaint is. It looks like his house is in the district. The district is still in southern Missouri. I'm really not sure what the complaint is about. But the House is furious about this. They're very furious. Have refused the Senate map twice and are basically demanding a conference with the Senate over what the map should look like. Again, the fight in Missouri right now is whether or not it's not over producing a 7-1 map. 7-1 is dead. It's over whether or not how Republican the Ann Wagner seat should be. and Wagner would prefer it to be as liberal as possible, for lack of a better term, while still being marginally Republican. Republicans, especially ones in St. Charles County, who would love to run in the district, would prefer the district to, one, have all of St. Charles County in it, but also, two, be much more Republican along the lines of Trump plus 10 to 12. The Senate proposal was Trump plus 8, where it took in most of St. Charles counties in the same seat, and then it stretches down into the iron or the lead belt in some really weird ways. It's a very unusual configuration. It's only Trump plus 8. But yeah, this is really over apparently Jason Smith and being very angry about something in redistricting involving him. We're really not sure. I've tried to look into this. I can't really find a lot about it, but that's the complaint the Missouri House seems to have. I don't know if anyone else has heard anything different. But it's very unusual. We're not sure what's going on. Ohio is a different story. The congressional map in Ohio appears to be ready to stand for 2022. The Supreme Court has kind of given up on trying to do that, probably because, one, they lack the actual constitutional ability to enforce it. Basically, this has just been a game of ping pong between the legislature and the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court has said you must draw maps fair along a proportional basis, and the legislature just stuck their middle finger out and said, no, we're not going to do that. You do so, or basically try and stop us, to which the Supreme Court cannot do anything other than getting rid of the map. Like, they can't actually order a new map. The Constitution does not give them the authority to do that. So they're basically stuck in a pickle over what to do. They have basically given up. The legislative maps, on the other hand, the Supreme Court has an active say in, and does have defensible arguments over proportionality. And so they're still debating over what the map should look like. The current debate is over what qualifies as a Democratic district. Ohio is a state that is really bad geography for Democrats and is only getting worse. And so Democrats are trying to basically solidify as many seats as possible while also having a chance in the majority. This is very hard and almost nearly impossible to do without breaking county and city contiguity restrictions in the Ohio Constitution. That's the argument Republicans are making. And so right now the court is basically trying to figure out whether or not what matters more is proportionality or compact districts that comply with the Constitution, both of which are in the Constitution. They have to be somewhat proportional, and they have to be, compact and not cross county lines and city lines too many times. This is a genuine struggle. This is not like in Arizona, where there's a commission to do it. This is the legislature and the Ohio Commission, for lack of a better term, which is majority Republican, drawing maps, and the Supreme Court saying no. So, we're still waiting on this. This could keep going on a while. There really doesn't seem to be any sort of push. From what I can tell, Maureen O'Connell's opinions kind of basically make it pretty clear that she wants a bipartisan map. And Democrats have made it pretty clear that the only map that they will accept and will vote for is their map, which makes producing a bipartisan map fairly impossible for Republicans. Democratic maps are mostly fine from what I've seen. They look fairly reasonable. There's some stuff I would not be doing, but they're not egregious partisan gerrymanders, I would say. But also Republicans do have a defensible argument, again, over the compactness. It's a really big pickle. We have no clue how this is going to end. I don't know if Joe or Dylan wants to throw in anything here, but it's a really, really strange situation.
It's just a mess.
I
think Dylan will say the same thing as I will.
I just want them to end it. I'm done talking about Ohio.
Oh, look. I know people are going to point at me like someone's going to say like you're a Republican. You agree with this in your dark, deep thoughts of the mind. What we need to do here is, and I'm sorry for the repeated dinging on my side. I've been getting some texts from some important news back home, dealing with some campaign stuff back there. So sorry about that. But really, what's very important about this is that Ohio has just, there was no trying to actively on the Republican side. Mm-hmm. This deserves legitimate criticism. Very harshly, is that they did not try to even fix what they, fix and make an attempt at a fair map. It would have been completely, I think most Republicans would have been completely all right with sinking Cincinnati and creating some toss-up seats in the Cleveland suburbs and the Columbus suburbs. I don't think there would have been that many Republicans upset at that. But yet they seem very stuck on this idea of we could do a 13-2 map. And I think that sounds very nice. And it sounds very good. but still, you could have at least tried.
Make a new
people
map.
like me and Eric look like evil bastards. You know what? I would have tried. I would have at least tried to say, okay, we're not. I wouldn't, obviously knowing what it was, I wouldn't have necessarily said it. Let's draw what the court is asking for, because I do think what the court is asking for is kind of bullshit in terms of proportionality and what they're asking for in a state like Ohio. But also, you could have tried a little harder and tried to make things a little bit more acceptable, and you didn't do that either. And that's
make a new map.
That's not good.
Why would we do that when we can just send the same map back?
Again,
they denied it. They denied it once. They denied it twice. They denied it 3 times. Maybe they won't on a 4th attempt.
4th time, apparently. It's not smart.
Again,
and politics.
And to be clear, like, this loophole was in the Ohio Constitution, where basically they was basically drawn where you could do a 13-2. The problem is the Cincinnati vote sync in particular is just idiotic. A lot of Republicans statewide are from Cincinnati. They're really attached to the idea of having Republican district in 2 Republican districts in Hamilton County, which, to be clear, one there, totally fine. Totally, this is not a ridiculously out of reach county for Republicans. There's very, very Republican areas in Hamilton County outside the city of Cincinnati.
The western part of Hamilton, still very Republican.
Western part and the eastern part, the closer eastern part to the suburban areas. But Republicans seem obsessed with the idea that they need 2 districts in Cincinnati, which is pretty ludicrous. It's ridiculous. I mean, the worst that can happen is they lose the seat anyway. But when you're drawing an entire suburban county in with Cleveland or Cincinnati, and then it's a Biden +8 seat, and you're like, we can win this district. I'm like, maybe once, but like, is it worth it? Is it really worth it?
No. That's
what did it cost you?
Everything. And the funny thing, you should be happy that Steve Stivers resigned, because now you have this 4-month-old freshman, Mike Carey in the Columbus suburbs. So you're like, yo, Mike, by the way, we're going to have to make you take on a more competitive seat here, buddy. Sorry, good luck. And, you have Anthony Gonzalez retiring because he was basically forced out for stupid, shitty reasons. You could say, hey, we're going to create a toss-up, district here in the Cleveland and Akron suburbs. Very good. Very fine. You could have still done what you did with Toledo, and you probably would have been okay. Yeah. You probably could have snuck that through.
Yeah, the Toledo, you can make it
stubborn and stupid.
You can make it easy. You can make a competitive seat in Toledo. You can make an easily competitive Trump +2 seat in Toledo. They're making the stupidest possible decisions, and I guess they're just expecting the court to give up, and they seem to have given up.
That's literally what they've done. They have gotten the court to basically give up. It was a war of attrition, and the Republican map makers were basically. I'm not going to go to World War II because that sounds weird. There's no really other good example here. Because it's
the seat of Leningrad. They just held out too long.
They just, I don't know. It's like it's like I don't know. I guess it's like the people at Fort Sumter. They basically just stayed, or at Guantanamo Bay. We've basically just stayed there at Guantanamo Bay, and the Cubans gave up on taking it. That's what it is, and it's stupid.
It is pretty problematic, though, that a court can say, "Hey, don't do this," and the legislature can be like, "Hey, I'm gonna do it anyway."
That is problematic. It's a bad thing.
Yeah.
I understand the legislatures across the country's frustration with this, and the understanding that redistricting is meant to be a legislature-only thing. It is one of the key parts of a legislative powers. Is a key part of it. But still,
you can't be behind court orders.
Try and make a deal.
Yeah, the problem here is I get that Republicans are frustrated, not just because it's the court's thinking, it's also the court cannot butt in about proportionality. It's not a standard for congressional districts in Ohio. So, I mean, even in Maryland, technically, the Constitution looks at legislative districts, and the judge there is like, well, that also applies to congressional districts as well. I don't know, but then again, in my state, the court was just like, oh, well, we were going to take these 4 provisions in the Constitution that have nothing to do with gerrymandering and say that they mean that gerrymandering is forbidden and that you must use a mathematical formula to not gerrymander. It's like, I mean, I get the complaint, but also
proportion.
It's a core, like you kind of got to follow up. I don't know. It's really tricky. Like, I do sympathize in part with the legislature, not over the desire to gerrymander, but the fact that the Supreme Court is being also kind of being obstinate here. I don't know. It's a strange situation. The legislative maps are really what matters here, but the 13-2 map, I don't know. It seems really, really iffy to me in a lot of ways that they just don't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, Ohio is a Republican state now. It just is.
Mm-hmm.
A Republican-favored map is not unreasonable. A 13-2...
Arguably unreasonable.
Yes, that's unreasonable.
Unreasonable.
I think
that would be like New York trying to do a 25-1.
Yeah, that's the laserized Hocklemander that was never going to happen.
You can't do 25-1. You can't do 13-2. That's a little silly.
They could have done 12-3. They could have done 11 to 3-1, and that probably the court probably wouldn't have said yes. But it would have been more defensible for the legislature because, quite honestly, drawing another competitive seat, drawing another Democratic seat around Columbus means you're drawing in a bunch of red counties in with like really blue parts of Columbus. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The Toledo seat's kind of doomed in the long run anyway, so you can kind of chalk that up as a Republican one long term.
You can even argue it would have been like if you would have drawn Toledo like a bit more, or even like a Columbus or Toledo seat a bit more competitive at least. You could have argued for 10-3-2 or even like 9-3-3, and then like, here you go. This is fine. This is fair. Makes sense.
But they didn't even try, and I mean, and compared to North Carolina actually did try. They legitimately tried several times. The maps looked like dog crap. They looked horrible. They didn't make a lot of sense, but they had competitive districts. Democrats would have won a majority of them. Cooper would have won a majority or 7 of the districts. They at least tried in the long run to produce a more competitive district. Ohio has just said no. They've not even tried to comply, which is really bad. I mean, even Maryland, they produced a more competitive or more fair map. Is it ideal? No, but they tried. Ohio is kind of the one standout here in the we didn't even try category. You don't even get the award for trying. You just get an F. In the redistricting, the redistricting fairness, like they're right up there with like of Oregon in terms of states that just like literally just decided not to try, not even pretend to produce something competitive. I don't know, but we're going to go ahead and move on because I think we kind of worn out Ohio. We got 2 more really interesting and fascinating stories. The first one revolves around Western North Carolina's most controversial congressman, Madison Cawthorn.
I love talking about him. Oh, it's so fun.
And again, keep in mind, if Mo Brooks had won, you would have also had a very controversial congressman, but you probably would not have had one who was talking about having congressmen having cocaine-filled orgies.
Which honestly is the least controversial thing he's ever said.
Yeah. So Cawthorn has been in hot water with Republicans. This is the thing that has set Republicans off, not the election denial, not the ridiculous conspiracy theory nonsense, not the sexual assault allegations. It's the saying
Zelensky is a thug in Ukraine.
Not
any of that.
You should get up in your representatives' faces and threaten them.
Yeah, no. This is where they draw the line. Is saying that congressmen might be involved in sex orgies and cocaine use. Now, to be fair, Madison Cawthorn apparently Kevin McCarthy basically pulled Madison Cawthorn into a meeting to chastise him. It looked like he was ready to cry after the meeting. If you look at the picture,
Kevin McCarthy told him, "You will say this isn't true."
Yeah. So apparently, Cawthorn backtracked and said that he originally said that he had been invited to an orgy and he had seen people doing cocaine. Apparently, he backtracked to where he said he thought he might have saw someone doing cocaine like 100 yards away on a car.
And it was a staffer. It wasn't even a congressman. It was some low level staffer.
Yeah, so that's in the world of backtracks. That is a very, very long backtrack right there.
It's a very long backtrack and a very stupid backtrack. I'll go on the record. I don't believe him. This definitely happened, even if I'm wish casting that this happened, because I believe that this happened. Maybe I want to because it just makes sense. But that's a really weird lie to make up. And then that's a really weird backtrack to do.
Yes, but the thing is, it makes sense for him to lie about this because this is what Cawthorn does. Since We thought, he was going to be kind of this cool. No, very bad. It turns out he's just like this conspiracy theory.
Very bad.
Yeah, he went from a guy who in the primary.
This is what he has. This is what his again. From what I've heard from people who I go to a school where people go and they do internships on Capitol Hill, and you hear some things. Here's what I have heard. No one takes Madison Cawthorn very seriously. His office is basically a bloated comms team. He does not try and actually do any legislating. Even his staffers do not read legislation for him. He just goes there to pontificate and to exploit platitudes. Even Jim Jordan's camp, who should like someone like Cawthorn, who mucks up the system, does not like Madison Cawthorn. He has a nickname for him, which I'm not going to say on here because it might get me canceled if I were to say it out loud. But he has a nickname for him. That is
text it to me in the private chat because now I'm curious.
Anyway,
but no,
also
even the Freedom Caucus, people in the Freedom Caucus have spoken out against him over this. This is how far it has gotten. When the Freedom Caucus, it takes a lot to get a Freedom Caucus member to go after another one. It takes a lot. And this is apparently the line. This is the line that.
That's not okay.
I put the nickname in the private.
That's not okay.
Yeah, that is not. But again, this is what he does. He's openly said that he does not do legislation. That his goal as a congressman is messaging. That is his focus. And his focus is also running mail ad campaigns and extracting donations out of people. And there's a certain crowd of Republicans in North Carolina and in any red state, but specifically in the South, who would be very open to the idea that, there are congressmen having orgy sex parties all the time. This is, if you're going after the church audience, this is a pretty good way to do it. I'm fighting against the forces of evil in Washington, D.C. Never mind, of course, that before the election, Madison Cawthorn, completely different page. He kind of went nuts towards the end of it, but during the primary, he was like, he was very different. He was talking about how, his ancestors fought in the Civil War, and he was fine tearing down Confederate statues because they're traitors. He was talking about how he supported gay marriage. And then the moment, he gets towards the election, all of a sudden it shifts towards this boomer clickbait nonsense. It's a really interesting shift. And this is the thing that has got people angry at him. It's worth noting, North Carolina Republicans are pretty irritated at him in general. He has, for some reason, crowned himself as king of the North Carolina Republican Party. He has tried to support primary candidates to other Republicans. He has put his weight heavily behind Bo Hines, who was on his, I believe, fifth or sixth congressional district that he's trying to run in. He's now running in. He had originally was going to run in Charlotte, and then was going to run in Virginia Fox's seat, which is based, which she's from Boone and was based around that area. Then was going to run in Greensboro. Then was going to run in a district that was stretching from Fayetteville to Johnston County. Then was going to run in Greensboro again. Then is now running in Wake County. This is who he's putting his weight behind. And then on top of that, he originally decided he was going to run in Charlotte. He was going to take the seat Tim Moore drew for himself. Which, to be clear, is not a good thing. Tim Moore probably should not have done that. But if you're a Democrat, you probably would much rather have Tim Moore in Congress than Madison Cawthorn. He decided to run in this district because it's redder than his district. His district was going to be about Trump plus 7. The Moore district was going to be about, I think, Trump plus anywhere from 11 to 19. I can't remember. It was somewhere in the double digits.
It was a double-digit seat.
Yeah, it was a double-digit seat. Now that seat is a Democratic seat for one term. He has moved back to his district, which is now about Trump plus 11, one of the few Republican gains in redistricting in North Carolina. He's got North Carolina Republicans are actually campaigning against him. Chuck Edwards, who had already announced his run, he's a state senator from the area. He's really irritating a lot of people, and it's not because he's some brash, bold, young conservative, going after the establishment, because he's a doofus and is making a fool of himself.
I know there was a poll that came out today that said, hey, Cawthorn's still way in the lead. Let's be very clear. This is just getting started against Madison Cawthorn.
Yeah.
The campaign against him is just getting started. It seems like the fact that it seems like we're going to have Tom Tillis likely supporting Edwards. It seems to be getting towards that every day. Richard Burr is probably going to stay out of this. This is just getting started against Cawthorn. I think that is very crucial to put down right now.
I would say he's a substantial favorite, and that's not going to change in the long run. But when then the House Majority Leader is basically, and from what it was told, apparently that Kevin McCarthy said straight up he needs to straighten his life out. Like that's pretty aggressive from the Speaker. I mean, that's pretty aggressive.
Can I just say this again? I'm reading a lot into it, and that's okay. This feels a lot like doth protest too much from the entire. From everyone in Congress.
Yeah, the problem was he didn't. Yeah, the problem was he didn't name names. The problem was he was basically making it seem like everyone is doing this, which means everyone is angry at him, because obviously they're not the ones, engaging in illicit behavior or whatever.
And I want to point out as well, this is like the end of a string of many stupid comments by Cawthorn over the last 2 months. Like this is basically just like almost. I wouldn't even go that deep. I want to say this is basically just like a straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah,
thing
he has been given so much slack and so much second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth chances. Like there comes a point where people are just like enough. And
that's fair.
If this is the thing that breaks it, that's fine. I mean, not Randy Feenstra. You had the guy in Kansas, Tim Hulskamp, who was defeated in his primary in the big first district, primarily for getting under leadership on legislation. Cawthorn is basically just getting on it because he's getting on everyone's nerves. And that's a pretty big deal. I do want to move on here real quick because we only have a little bit of time left, and there's one more story we wanted to go over. But we'll certainly be covering the Cawthorn thing more soon. The last thing we'll go over is the Eric Greitens scandal. This is the latest Eric Greitens scandal. For those who are unaware, Eric Greitens is the former governor of Missouri, a Democrat turned Republican to run for the governor of Missouri. He won and then had to resign midterm over sexual allegations against him. He was forced to resign. Josh Hawley pretty aggressively went after him, to his credit. That was one of the, say what you will about Josh Hawley. He did do one good thing that once. And he has remained steadfastly opposed to Eric Greitens for that reason. A lot of Missouri Republicans are still mistrustful over him over his time as a Democrat. And then obviously you have all this scandal. Despite all of this, he has remained the front runner in the Senate race. There, not a big front runner, in a field of multiple candidates. He's leading in a pack of 6 or 7 candidates with about 20% of the vote. Similar situation to places like Pennsylvania and Ohio. The big thing, though, is that the latest that came out was further allegations of sexual abuse, domestic abuse against him by his former wife. And these are very serious allegations. They're credible. They're beyond credible. And it seems, very criminal. The allegations are beyond criminal. Really reprehensible stuff. People like this should not be in office. And it seems like a very good thing that he is not. As a result of this, the latest polls that come out have shown him falling out of that first place position. Obviously, he's been kind of running a pariah campaign. He's been endorsed by the fringiest of the fringe people. Trump has been really reticent to endorse him. Josh Hawley has basically been telling the Trump camp to not do this. You do not want to do this. This will be really, really bad. This will be really embarrassing for you. Do not do this. But Republicans have yet to consolidate on a second candidate. You have, obviously, Trump really likes Billy Long, the auctioneer turned congressman. Would certainly be an interesting senator, but it's probably not going to happen. You have a bunch of other people running. So basically what I'm saying here is keep an eye on this. These are very, very serious allegations. It is Missouri. It is a very, very difficult state for Republicans to lose. But these sorts of allegations are really horrific. It would be very hard to imagine Greitens being able to win a nomination here, let alone a Senate campaign. Again, it's Missouri. Roy Moore almost won in Alabama. Bob Menendez wins every time in New Jersey. Like, this happens all the time. You have corrupt politicians, or you have people that have had abuse allegations against them to varying degree. Either ones, you have these people who do win. People have had sexual stuff or who have had abuse stuff, corruption stuff. But this is really, really bad. Like, this is bad. I can't really say anything more beyond very, very bad.
It's disgusting. It's horrendous and bad. If any of these are proven true, he needs to go to jail.
Yeah, this is the stuff.
Simple as.
Yeah, this is stuff you spend years in jail over, not like months, years.
Yeah, not typically something you should be elected to Congress for or the
No.
Senate.
I would, if he is the nominee, I would encourage fellow Republicans to write in or vote against him.
Mhm.
I would
Yeah.
personally do that. He is a despicable man. He cannot be. He is not someone who should be in the United States Senate.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, I think we can all be agreement with that. And people in general can be. Obviously, Republicans in Missouri are scrambling to consolidate to try and figure out a path through this. Greitens is behaving as usual, which is reprehensibly, for lack of a better term. This is just pretty normal behavior for him publicly in response to this.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, I'm a little surprised it took these allegations, considering the old ones against him, to get everyone like, oh God, we got to move. But hey, I'm glad.
Yeah.
I mean, people already wanted him out.
Yeah.
This just makes it even more necessary than it already was to make sure this guy doesn't win.
Yeah, it's. I would not be surprised if you see a consolidation shortly, because this is quickly gone from a scenario where a guy who could make this thing close to not only a guy that could lose, but also just
a bad guy who shouldn't be there.
Yeah, like just beyond awful stuff. Like, I would not be surprised if he were to somehow to win an election that the Senate could possibly expel him immediately. That's how bad this stuff is. Like, it would. Like, this is really, really bad. But on that note, we'll close off for today. We went a little bit over, but I hope you appreciated the length here and the detail we went into these things on. As always, you can find us at elections-daily.com and elections_daily on Twitter. We post political news, updates, stories, podcasts, all sorts of stuff. If you're listening to us on a podcast platform, you know where to find us. If you don't listen to us on a podcast platform or on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, all sorts of places, give us a look. You can find us anywhere, or pretty much it will be available in their replay. We're also on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter at Cunningham2. Where can we find you guys on Twitter?
You can find me at Joseph Szymanski. That's JOSEPHSZYMANSKI, all one word.
And you can find me at Dylan W. Brown 1.
Yep. And with that, we'll close off this week. Thank you guys for watching. We really appreciate your support. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, whatever you do. Suggestions, anything appreciated. We really appreciate your support. And with that, we'll close off. Thank you guys for watching. We'll be back next week for the next edition of Elections Weekly.